we will look at the concept of functions. Before diving into functions, we should first look at a problem, and then we should look at how functions help us solve that problem. So here I'm just going to write some console log lines, console.log. And these 5 console log lines simply output a triangle. So imagine we want to output this triangle multiple times. Well, the straightforward method would be to simply just copy this code and print it multiple times. And in fact, it does achieve the result we want. However, if you notice, the code is becoming more and more redundant as we repeat the code. And it violates the dry principle. The dry principle means don't repeat yourself. The dry principle, or don't repeat yourself principle, simply states that we should reduce the repetition in the code as much as possible. So what can we do to fix this? Well, this is where the functions come into use. A function is simply a reserved set of lines of code which we can execute whenever we want. So in this case, let's create a function. So here we have these set of lines of code which we want to use again and again later. So in this case, we can just form a code block using these. By enclosing these lines into an opening and a closing curly bracket, we have created a code block. And next, we write the keyword function here, followed by the name which we want to assign this function. In this case, I'll just write draw triangle. And then we write an opening and a closing bracket. The purpose of these two brackets will become more clear as we progress through the chapters. For now, it's just important to note that this is the syntax of writing a function. The general syntax is shown on the screen. So we basically write the function keyword followed by the name of the function which we want to create, followed by the opening and a closing round bracket, and then an opening and a closing curly bracket in which we write any amount of lines of code that we want to reserve for later use. So this code block is executed when we execute the function. So notice that if I save and run this, it does not output anything. This is because, as stated before, a function is simply a reserved set of lines of code, which means that these lines of code are only executed when we explicitly execute this function. So how do we explicitly execute this function? Well, we simply just write the name of the function followed by an opening and a closing bracket. And then we end it with a semicolon because this is a statement. And if I run this, it will draw a triangle. In fact, I can have as many triangles as I want. And as you can see, it outputs 5 triangles. So instead of writing these set of lines 5 times, we simply created a function. And then we called or executed that function multiple times. As a quick note, the function execution is alternatively referred to as a function call.